Mr. Brown and
Ms. Kirstein.
Ms. Kirstein. Good to see you again. Thank you.
So in January, the governor proposed $1.5 billion be set aside in a new fund called the State Office Infrastructure Fund. And he proposed that this fund would be continuously appropriated to pay for the renovation and replacement of various state office buildings. He also proposed to begin with 3 specific office buildings, the construction of a new natural resources building, the renovation or replacement of a Capitol Annex, and also the replacement of the existing food and agriculture annex building. So the Senate proposal would set aside $1 billion in a separate fund for state office buildings and facilities, but in contrast to the governor's proposal, this fund would not be continuously appropriated. Instead, it would be appropriated by the legislature, and specifically in 16-17, the Senate proposal would appropriate $10.1 million, and this is the amount that the administration indicates is necessary in that first year in 16-17 to start those 3 projects that I mentioned previously. We would note that the other $500 million that was in the governor's proposal is proposed to be placed in the special fund for economic uncertainties.
Thank you, Ms. Kirstein. Ms. Costa.
Yes, thank you. Again, the administration does appreciate the Budget Committee's support of this particular proposal. I would note that our proposal is slightly higher at $1.5 billion compared to the Senate version before you. As the analyst has pointed out, the funding mechanism in this proposal is slightly different than our proposal. And we look forward to working with the legislature on kind of what is the appropriate legislative oversight of these funds, so long as that structure does not slow down the project and in turn increase project costs.
Thank you. Ms. Kirstein, I apologize. I was a bit distracted. You made comments with regard to the continuous appropriation.
I had simply noted that this Senate proposal does not include a continuous appropriation. However, I would also note that our office has raised serious concerns about the use of a continuous appropriation in this context. We think it reduces legislative oversight, and so that's particularly problematic. This is a large amount of money. These are very complex projects, and at this point, these projects aren't fully scoped. They're not fully fleshed out, and so we think it's particularly important for the legislature to continue to have oversight over these funds. So the Senate proposal is more consistent with our recommendation.
Right. Thank you for that. And you and your office are always consistent in that comment with regard to continuous appropriations and your concern for legislative oversight. So I just want to underscore that. Though, as opposed to continuous appropriation, if we were trying to meet some compromise with the Department of Finance, we could do a multi-year appropriation, and that gives us a little bit more oversight.
Certainly, that's always a possibility. I would note, however, that with these particular projects, there is quite a bit of uncertainty about the specifics of the project. So one of the potential downsides to doing that is that it might sort of reduce the amount of oversight you have normally through the budget process. Normally, if you just approve the 16-17 amounts, then the administration would come forward in the next year, and then they would ask for an additional appropriation, and that would give you an opportunity to review the work they've done in the initial planning and study phase, and so that could be beneficial.
Thank you, Ms. Kirstein. And Ms. Costa, I'm going to presume you have no intention of denying the legislature any oversight with regard to such large spending on these capital improvements. So what is the need for the continuous appropriation?
Well, in my comments, I mentioned that the administration is willing to work with the legislature on this oversight. I think our caveat there would be developing a mechanism that would not delay the projects and in turn increase our costs for these projects. So I think we're open to working with you on what's the appropriate way. And then I just further noted that our proposal was slightly higher at $1.5 billion versus the proposal before you.
Right. So just To clarify for everyone, the Senate proposal is rather than the 1.5, again, this is one-time general fund money that we have, rather than put all that into the infrastructure funding for state buildings, place $1 billion there and the other $500 million into the special fund for economic uncertainties, along with the appropriation of the $10.1 million that the administration is looking for planning and design. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Out in the district, the two things that I hear about is jobs and infrastructure. And while I appreciate the need for our natural resources building, our O Street office building, and plans to update our capital annex, these are infrastructure improvements that aren't touching any of our constituents in our districts. We just heard that the California Transportation Commission just cut $750 million for very important infrastructure throughout the state. In many counties, Orange County, Riverside County, San Bernardino, Contra Costa County, and maybe yours, it places a lot of projects in jeopardy, delaying them for many, many years, while our citizens are frustrated sitting in a gridlock, our bridges that need replacing. And so I think we ought to postpone these infrastructure improvements, and instead, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd like to make a motion or a move that we redirect $754 million of these infrastructure dollars to fund those projects that were cut by the California Transportation Commission. And let's focus on the whole state, not just Sacramento, and really show our citizens that we're serious about infrastructure in a way in which they can feel and see.
Okay. So we have a motion. First, we're going to hear from Senator Nguyen and then Senator Pan, and then we'll get, I'm sorry, Senator Glazer, Senator Nguyen, and then Senator Pan. Senator Glazer, and then Senator Nguyen, and Senator Pan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the discussion has been about transfers, continuous appropriations, and I appreciate that choice. But what I said in sub 4, and still isn't reflected here, is that it is a challenge. First, I praise the administration for identifying these deficiencies and trying to own up to them and start to fund them, and that's an appropriate and prudent step. I think my challenge has always been that we do have great needs in the state, whether it's the university system or our parks. There's a lot of capital needs all across the board, and how are we prioritizing these specific elements that we're being asked to fund today versus all of those? And that's the dilemma that I have versus how the money is transferred. I appreciate my colleague from the Inland Empire's proposal to have it be directed into a specific way, but it still lacks these broader understandings and choices that are really out there, in addition to the road issues that he raises as his top priority for the money. And I think that's the problem that I have generally with this, is that where is the perspective? So if I go back to my constituents and say I agreed to fund a legislative office building, and they say, well, why didn't you do this or that? I think we should be able to answer that question.
Thank you, Senator Nguyen.
Thank you.
Senator Glazer and Senator Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with being able to maybe move the funding over to transportation, but if that motion doesn't work, I do have a question on the capital annex redesign, because I know recently I signed a letter with the Women's Caucus calling on the governor to restore funding for child care services. And I was wondering if our plan for the capital annex redesign include daycare facilities. Are there, if they include daycare facilities, and if there's any, are there any plans to include, accurate pumping rooms in the annex for breastfeeding for mothers as well? If not, please consider that, or as you're going through the process of designing this, because the new facility needs those facilities, daycare and pumping, breastfeeding rooms for mothers as well, for our employees and members.
We'll take that as a comment. Thank you. I don't think we're that far along.
Exactly. We're not that far along in this proposal, but duly noted, Senator.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Pan.
Thank you. I want to thank the governor for his leadership in proposing this capital fund, and actually, I support the $1.5 billion. I understand why the Senate may have decided to reduce the amount. One thing I want to speak to, because I mean, these are my constituents who are working in these buildings, but it's not just my district that benefits. Don't forget, these are the workers who you're counting on whenever we pass a bill, we pass a budget, to carry out the laws that we pass, the budgets that we pass, the actions. These are the people that have to deliver when your constituents ask for help from state government. And I've toured some of these buildings and facilities. And when you think about the workspaces that they're working in, I think many of us have worked in probably a variety of different workspaces, and I hope you've never had to work in a workspace that really made it hard for you to do your job. And in the meantime, not just my constituents, but everyone's constituents here expect them to do their job and appropriately, and expect them to carry out the work of the state. Now, we happen to be in, Sacramento happens to be the state capital. That's why most of them, we're talking about buildings here, but they are doing the work of the state, not just the work of people who live in Sacramento. They're working for all of your constituents here. And so if we are unwilling to consider the fact that, and as I said, some of these facilities are really pretty old and run down. And actually, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So whether, and I realize we have tip of the iceberg on transportation, we have tip of the iceberg on a lot of other things as well. But I really, I think that let's not be short-sighted in saying that, well, we don't need to do anything to essentially maintain the structures in which are ensure that we have adequate structures, and we are still behind for the people who are trying to do the work for us. I think that would be extremely short-sighted. So I appreciate the governor being willing to step forward and say, look, we need to move forward on this. I think he's chosen to take a bold step by saying, I recognize that in my efforts toward fiscal prudence, that we'll try to allocate and put money aside and actually finance it in a way, in my mind, that will actually allow us to do it, with dedicated funds that's going to be cheaper than we could have done if we, let's say, bonded it or did some other mechanism. I do agree that we need to ensure there's legislative oversight. We need to do it in a way, and I appreciate the administration being open to doing it in a way to be sure that we, on one hand, don't slow down the construction so that we can make maximum efficiency of the dollars. And then at the same time, we obviously clearly we want to be sure there's adequate legislative oversight. I hope that certainly that the people who are going to be working there and my local areas, that we're going to have some way to also have some input too. And we're looking at how we can try to leverage, be sure that we leverage opportunities to make maximum opportunity for the state to benefit from these new buildings. But this is not just about, oh, well, we just want some new buildings. This is really about trying to replace some really outdated and structures where it's difficult for people to do their work, and we can do better. And again, this is just tip of the iceberg on this part. But I certainly hope that we, as essentially the board of directors in many ways of the state government, will understand the need to be sure that the people who work for us are able to do their jobs and be able to do their work on behalf of the people we represent. So I urge support for this proposal. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Pan. Appreciate your comments. And Senator Wolk.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a substitute motion, if that is in order, to adopt the Senate proposal to establish the fund with a transfer of $1 billion and then to appropriate $10.1 million for planning and design and approve the placeholder trailer bill language governing the fund.
Okay. We have a motion. We do have a motion. Our rules have allowance for substitute motions to take precedent. I don't want to shortchange Senator Stone's suggestion here. And so as we take up Senator Wilk's substitute motion, I want to make the following comments. That, first of all, we have a special session on transportation still ongoing, so our work is not yet done there. I think for us to appropriate $754 million for transportation projects that you've mentioned as a result of the action taken by the California Transportation Commission very much short circuits the special session and does disrespect to it because we have not completed our work there. Additionally, $754 million is clearly a very small percentage of, I think, the $57 billion. Is that the outstanding need for transportation projects in the state of California? So barely a percentage of it. And that traditionally we use user fees, oftentimes in the form of gas taxes, to pay as an ongoing source of revenue. And that's part of the yet decided action in the special session on transportation. So for all those reasons, I appreciate your comments, and though we're not voting on that right now since we have the substitute motion, those would be all of my reasons to not support the original motion. You have a comment, Senator?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your explanation as to why you might think this is premature. I have heard the frustration and anger towards this institution for our lack of performance in providing infrastructure, utilizing existing revenues that have historically been utilized to provide for bridges and roads. And many of my constituents in Riverside County have to commute sometimes an hour, sometimes 2, sometimes 3 hours each way to get to their job. And you talk about the inconvenience of sharing offices here in Sacramento. I think if you go to the 38 million people today and say, would you rather see $750 million spent towards fixing your bridges and your roads and making your commute a little easier as a gesture, as a down payment, to fix our infrastructure versus fixing a few buildings in Sacramento and embarking on a capital improvement plan that probably none of us will ever be alive to even see come to fruition? I think I will opine that the citizens of the state are going to be extremely upset and very disappointed that we have $750 million that we can use right now in projects that are on the books in many counties, including my own, that are not going to understand you prioritizing infrastructure here in the state capitol versus infrastructure in the 58 counties that are struggling to provide the infrastructure. So I respect this maneuver, if you will, to take the onus off of having you commit to a vote on behalf of the constituents of the state versus a local issue and an inconvenience to local citizens at the expense of 38 million people. If we want to go down that path, that's fine, but I'm sure that the media will report this appropriately. And I think it's a sad day that we are not stepping up to the plate in a realistic way to provide infrastructure, depending on a possibility of us passing yet another tax in the state of California that has the highest taxes in the country. People are sick of it. If you don't see it, and this is a presidential election, the people that are tired of establishment politics on both sides of the aisle, on the left, on the right, Republican, Democrat, they're sick and tired of it. And I think it's going to show in this election. And I'm going to stand up once again for the people of this state that are sick and tired of a lot of rhetoric up here, a lot of false promises, changing the rules, and not delivering the infrastructure that they paid dearly for. And it affects their quality of life, and I'm going to stand up for their quality of life, at least my constituents in Riverside County that have to do tremendous commuting. I know that they would support $750 million going towards statewide infrastructure as a down payment on our promise to provide the same.
Thank you, Senator Stone. I share your frustration. I'm also going to speak for the people of California that there's probably disapproval with our inability to reach a 2/3 majority vote so that we can pass either the governor's proposal or Senator Bell's proposal. We have not completed our work in the special session on transportation. If it were a simple majority vote, which gives the majority party the decision-making, which in a democracy is often what we do, I suspect that we would have completed our work in the special session. But with a 2/3 majority, the power shifts to the minority. And so that's part of our struggle right now. I'm not going to comment further on that. It's just that we have work to do in the Transportation Special Session Committee, which is completely different from what is before us today. So I'm going to call the roll on the substitute motion that Senator Wolk has put forward. Please call the roll.
Leno?
Aye.
Nielsen? No. Allen? Anderson? No. Bell? Aye. Block? Aye. Glazer? Hancock? Aye. Mitchell? Monning? Aye. Morlock? Wynn? No. Pan? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Roth? Stone? No. Wolk?
Aye.
Done. 9-5 is the vote count. The measure passes, leaving us with our three final issues, 17, 19, and 20. Moving on to 17, on page 20, dealing with the Board of Equalization and centralized revenue opportunity system. Ms. Costa.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The administration appreciates the Budget Committee recommendation to provide funding for the centralized revenue opportunity system. Conceptually, we also support staff's recommendation regarding proposed budget bill language to augment additional funding and the inclusion of supplemental reporting language. The administration looks forward to working with the Senate on that language.
Sure, just 1 second. And LAO, Mr. Miller, do you have some comments? I'm sorry.
I'm referred to the Legislative Analyst's Office, but we have no comments or concerns with the proposal put forward by the Senate.
Okay. Thank you. Senator Wolk has made a motion to adopt the Senate proposal, which is for one-year funding for the request alternative budget bill language, reducing the Department of Finance's ability to augment and supplemental reporting language. So that's the motion before us. Senator Pan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We heard this in budgets of 4, and clearly this is an important program, but I think, again, it's about oversight, and one of the things that I know I mentioned in the subcommittee, but I hope I want to reiterate is that we've spent a lot of time looking at particularly IT systems and so forth, and both successes and failures, and we want to be sure that that we don't short-circuit a lot of the forms we put in place to be sure there's both oversight and that that the program's successful. We know we need this, but we also, if it doesn't work, and we've had, unfortunately, several examples where IT systems have not worked, it's often because people have rushed or short-circuited process that have been put in place. So, and I've urged that in terms of the oversight, that the legislature actually get reports at each of the stages, or equivalent stages that Cal IT has put forth in terms of reporting to the legislature on the success of that each stage of implementation. So it's not just merely a quarterly report, and if you happen to go faster, it'll be more frequent, but that we are informed with each stage, how each stage has gone on before we move on to the next one. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pan, for giving us that update from sub 4, given Senator Roth's absence right now. So we do have a motion. If there are no other questions and no public comment, call the roll, please.
Leno?
Aye.
Nielsen?
Aye.
Allen? Aye. Anderson? Aye. Bell? Aye. Block? Aye. Glazer? Aye. Hancock? Aye. Mitchell? Monning? Aye. Morlock? Wynn? Pan? Aye. Pavley? Aye. Roth? Stone? Wolk?
14-0. The measure passes. So we're moving into subcommittee number 5 on corrections. And the first item is issue 19, which is a comprehensive arts package to be found on page 22.